The air in the grand ballroom felt uncomfortably thin, heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and meaningless conversation. Aiyana stood near the edge of the champagne tower, her thumb absently rubbing the 2-carat diamond on her left hand. It was beautiful, flawless, and felt like a miniature handcuff. Her husband, Richard, was across the room, holding court with a group of investors. He hadn't looked at her in over an hour. Aiyana took a slow sip of her drink, letting her gaze drift over the sea of tailored suits and silk gowns until it stopped dead. She was leaning against the mahogany bar. High cheekbones, dark, sharp eyes, and a tailored emerald suit that fit her like a second skin. But it wasn't her striking features that caught Aiyana, it was the way she was looking back. The woman's gaze was direct, unwavering, and completely devoid of the polite pretense that infected the rest of the room. Aiyana's breath hitched. The woman tilted her head, a faint, knowing smirk playing on her lips, and her eyes briefly flicked down to Aiyana's left hand. In that split second, the diamond felt impossibly heavy. It felt like a lie. Aiyana set her champagne glass down on a passing waiter's tray. Without breaking eye contact with the stranger, Aiyana reached over with her right hand, gripped the cold metal, and slowly slid the wedding ring off her finger. The skin beneath felt exposed, vulnerable, and thrillingly cool. She dropped the ring into the silk pocket of her evening gown. The woman at the bar pushed off the mahogany wood and began walking toward her. "I'm Kaya," the woman said as she stopped just inches away, her voice a low, warm hum that seemed to vibrate right through Aiyana's chest. "And you look like someone who is desperately trying to escape." "I'm Aiyana," she replied, her voice remarkably steady despite the sudden pounding of her heart. "And I think I just took my first step." The following weeks were a masterclass in deception and awakening. Aiyana told Richard she was taking up evening pottery classes with her friend Winona. Instead, she was losing herself in Kaya. Kaya's world was everything Aiyana's was not. It was messy, vibrant, and fiercely independent. Kaya was a freelance photographer who lived in a sun-drenched loft downtown, filled with mismatched furniture, piles of vintage cameras, and the constant smell of dark roast coffee and sandalwood. "You hide yourself well," Kaya murmured one rainy Tuesday afternoon. They were tangled in the sheets of Kaya's bed, the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the skylight masking the sounds of the city below. Kaya's fingertips traced a slow path down Aiyana's spine. Aiyana closed her eyes, leaning into the touch. "I've had a lot of practice. Richard doesn't want a partner. He wants an ornament. I just forgot how to be anything else." "You're not an ornament, Aiyana," Kaya said, her tones suddenly fierce. She propped herself up on one elbow, forcing Aiyana to look at her. "You're fire. You just forgot how to burn." Aiyana pulled Kaya down into a kiss, desperate and hungry. With Kaya, she didn't have to pretend. She didn't have to smile at empty jokes or host dinners for men who looked right through her. With Kaya, she was seen. But the ring in her jewelry box at home grew heavier with every passing day. The double life was beginning to fray her nerves. She loved Kaya. It was terrifying and sudden, but it was the truest thing she had ever felt. She knew what she had to do. It happened on a Thursday. Richard had snapped at her over something trivial, a misplaced dry-cleaning ticket, and the sheer contempt in his voice was the final push Aiyana needed. She packed a single overnight bag. She left the diamond ring sitting squarely on the center of Richard's immaculate oak desk, right next to a short, handwritten note. There were no apologies in the letter, only facts. Her hands shook as she drove to Kaya's loft. The rain from earlier in the week had returned, slicking the neon-lit streets. Aiyana's heart was a wild bird in her chest. She was giving up financial security, social standing, and a decade of history, all for a woman she had known for exactly 6 weeks. But as she parked outside Kaya's building, she felt nothing but an overwhelming, dizzying sense of freedom. She used the spare key Kaya had given her 2 weeks prior. "Kaya," Aiyana called out, dropping her bag by the door. "I did it. I finally did it." The loft was silent. The lights were off, save for a harsh, fluorescent glow spilling out from the spare bedroom Kaya used as a darkroom and office, a room Aiyana rarely went into. "Kaya?" Aiyana walked toward the light, her smile faltering. She pushed the half-open door wider, stepping into the office. The room was empty of people, but it was far from bare. Aiyana froze, the breath completely knocked out of her lungs. Covering the entire back wall of the office was a massive corkboard. It was a chaotic web of photographs, financial documents, bank statements, and maps, all connected by taut lines of red string. Right in the center of the board was a large, high-resolution photograph of Richard. Aiyana walked closer, her mind struggling to process the visual assault. Surrounding Richard's photo were candid shots of his business partners, highlighted offshore account numbers, and surveillance photos of Richard's corporate building. And then, her eyes drifted to the lower left quadrant of the board. There were photos of her. Aiyana at the grocery store. Aiyana getting her hair done. Aiyana at the gala, the exact moment she had slipped her ring off her finger, captured clearly through a telephoto lens. Beneath her photo, a yellow sticky note was pinned. It read, "Asset vulnerable. Leverage for access to home safe. Aiyana." The voice came from the doorway. Aiyana spun around to see Kaya standing there, soaking wet from the rain, holding a grocery bag. The color drained from Kaya's face as she took in the scene. Aiyana, the overnight bag in the hall, and the exposed corkboard. "What is this?" Aiyana's voice was barely a whisper. It didn't sound like her own. Kaya slowly set the groceries on the floor. She held her hands up, palms open, a gesture of surrender. "Aiyana, please. Let me explain." "Explain?" Aiyana gestured wildly to the wall. "You're what? A cop? A private investigator?" "Independent investigative journalist," Kaya said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been tracking Richard's shell companies for 2 years. He's defrauding his investors out of millions and funneling it offshore. I couldn't get close to his inner circle." "So you targeted his wife," Aiyana said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. The charming smile at the gala. The intense, soul-searching questions. The instant connection. It was all a perfectly calculated sting operation. "At first," Kaya admitted, stepping into the room. Her dark eyes were shining with unshed tears. "Yes. At first you were just a way in. I needed the access codes to his home office network. I thought I could seduce you, get the codes, and get out." Aiyana let out a bitter, broken laugh, wrapping her arms around her own stomach as if trying to hold herself together. "And the ring? Taking off my ring? Did you find that amusing? A lonely, desperate housewife falling right into your trap?" "No." Kaya closed the distance between them, grabbing Aiyana's shoulders. Aiyana flinched, but Kaya held on tight. "Aiyana, look at me. The plan was a lie. But us? That wasn't a lie. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, I ruined my own investigation because I fell in love with you." "Don't," Aiyana whispered, squeezing her eyes shut. "I mean it," Kaya pleaded, her voice cracking. "I stopped trying to get the codes 3 weeks ago. I was going to scrap the whole story. I was going to pack up this room tonight. Why do you think I never pushed you for details about his work? I didn't want the story anymore. I just wanted you." Aiyana opened her eyes, looking at the woman she had just blown up her entire life for. The terrifying part was that she could see the truth in Kaya's eyes. The desperation was real. "I left him tonight," Aiyana said hollowly. "I left my ring on his desk. I came here to start a life with you." Kaya let out a choked breath, pulling Aiyana into her chest. Aiyana didn't hug her back, but she didn't pull away either. She just stood there, listening to the rapid heartbeat of a woman who had built their love on a foundation of absolute deceit. "We can still do this," Kaya whispered into her hair. "We can leave. Tonight. I'll burn the board. I'll drop the story. We can just go." Aiyana slowly pulled back, looking at the corkboard, then back to Kaya. The pain in her chest was slowly morphing into something else. Something sharper. She had spent a decade being a pawn in Richard's life, a silent accessory. She had thought she was taking back her power by leaving him for Kaya, only to find out she was just a pawn on a different board. But Aiyana was done being played. She looked at the sticky note beneath her face. "Asset vulnerable." "No," Aiyana said, her voice dropping into a register of cold steel Kaya had never heard before. Kaya's face crumpled. "Aiyana, please." "No, we are not running," Aiyana said, stepping back toward the corkboard. She reached out and ripped the sticky note with her name off the wall, crumpling it in her fist. She turned to face Kaya, her eyes flashing with a dangerous, brilliant light. "You want the access codes to a safe?" Aiyana asked. Kaya blinked, stunned. "What?" "I know his passwords. I know where the secondary ledgers are hidden," Aiyana said, standing taller, the timid, trapped wife vanishing entirely. "He didn't think I was smart enough to understand them, so he never hid them from me." Kaya stared at her, mesmerized and slightly terrified. "Aiyana, if we expose him, your assets, your whole life, it gets dragged into the mud with him." "It's already in the mud," Aiyana replied, walking past Kaya toward her overnight bag by the door. She picked it up, her grip firm. I took off my ring because I wanted to destroy the cage I was living in. So, let's burn it all down to the foundation. Aiyana looked back over her shoulder, a fiercely beautiful, ruthless smile crossing her lips. Boot up your computer, Kaya. We have an article to write.